Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Wills, Women, and Wealth podcast. I'm Elsa W. Smith, your Maryland estate planning and probate attorney, and I'm thrilled to have you with us today. We're here to empower women who value their health, wealth, and the legacies they're creating. This podcast delves into a diverse range of subjects encompassing finance, law, mental and physical health, and beyond. Our commitment is to furnish you with invaluable insights, engaging expert interviews, and enlightening episodes that address your questions on wills, estate planning, and probate matters. Remember, this is your community, and we want to hear from you. Engage with us, ask questions, suggest topics. Let's build a dialogue. Reach out to us on social media or leave us a comment below. Your input fuels the conversations we have. You can find all of our episodes on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. Be sure to subscribe and stay tuned for our upcoming content. We appreciate your support, and if you enjoy the podcast, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. Your review helps amplify our reach and brings our content to more listeners. And now, on with the podcast.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Wills, Women, and Wealth podcast. I'm so excited to bring you today's guest. Our guest today is Deborah Yelvington, founder and president of Dynamic Permits. Deborah began the business of planning and permit expediting after working in the construction industry for many years, but finding that there was a gap in the area of homeowner and building department relations. She desired to fill that space with a team of professional expediters who would stand in that gap and act as liaison between the building permit agencies and the property owners. The team she has trained is empowered with an influential and personable spirit and is able to communicate to the homeowner or property owner in a comprehensive way. Deb, welcome to the Wills, Women, and Wealth podcast.
Thank you, Elsa. It's a real honor to be invited here and to be part of what you're putting out there, especially empowering women. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to have you. So let's get into it because we've got a lot to cover in today's podcast. So tell us really what does your company do and who do you primarily serve?
So what we do is provide building permit expediting. However, many of our clients beforehand didn't know what an expediter was. But a building permit expediter acts as a liaison between a homeowner or property owner, design professionals, or contractors that are in the building industry, and the local building departments to help process the building permits and coax the whole process along through inspections and the final completion of the documents at the end.
You and I had a rich conversation during our show prep, and you mentioned that this wasn't your original career path. Can you share that transition story with the audience?
Yeah, it's unusual because I always had a desire to be in the art field. I went to school for art and found, since I was growing up on Long Island, New York, my life, I really liked the suburbs, and the art world and graphics marketing really drew you into more of the city environment. And I found it wasn't for me. And I wound up getting a position doing drafting for a structural engineer. So I was drawn into architecture and just the whole concept of putting on paper design and then seeing the structures built. It was quite interesting. So I stayed with that structural engineer for over a dozen years and grew in many ways. A lot of it was a small business, learning how to work alongside the founder of that company, and then eventually finding the need to go out on my own. So I went from art towards architecture and engineering, construction type of work, and eventually found that I could sustain myself by going on my own and expanding from plans into more the permit expediting.
Wonderful. Now, for someone hearing this for the first time, what exactly is a permit?
So it's a good question because there's all types of permits. There's driving permits, there's permits to hold events outside, but we deal with building permits. And that's when you fill out an application and apply to construct something on your property, whether it's in a residential property, commercial, industrial. You need a permit from your city or township, and you provide plans of what you're wanting to build there, a site plan where you're going to sit that. It has to go through the proper channels to get approval that way. Many homeowners, though, we have found, especially on Long Island, there are times where they just build something without the benefit of a building permit. So it turns out that much of our work in building permit expediting is assisting homeowners for obtaining permits after the fact. So that's something that was already built, but technically it's not a legal structure and it needs to go through the proper channels to be applied for, inspected, and then for that permit to close out with a legal certificate called either a CO for certificate of occupancy or a CFC is a certificate of completion. So if you don't have those documents and that structure has not been approved, then you as the homeowner don't know if you and your family are safe living or using that structure. And when you go to sell your property, it opens another can of worms if you don't have all legal structures on your property.
That leads me to the next question. And what is a certificate of occupancy, or a CO, as you referred to it, and why is it so important?
Yeah. And again, it's another language when you're dealing with different industries. And even in the building industry, with design professionals that are architects, engineers, contractors, they have some knowledge of what the building department is looking for. But it's a very precise language and permit approval process that you have to go through. So the certificate of occupancy, or a CO, comes at the end. So a building permit is issued. Then you are constructing according to plans that have been approved in that process. The local building department will send out officials to inspect the work along different parts, phases of the construction. And then you'll get issued a final certificate of occupancy. That means that structure has been approved. It was built according to the building code. The local officials have checked it out and approved it. And so you can count on it as being safe and legal. And that is the final CO, or certificate of completion, that is issued at the end. So that's the final closing out of the permit, is actually to obtain that kind of a certificate. And as a homeowner, especially, you should have all those on file for anything that you've constructed on your property or altered.
Deb, in your experience, why do so many homeowners underestimate this part of property ownership?
I think maybe it's we Americans, we're an independent lot and feel we're glad to be property owners. And often the reply that I get is, it's my property and I'm going to build that if I want to. And we do have a free country. However, we have laws in place to protect property owners and the property owners around them. So I think because there's such pressure in life and time, parameters that press on everyone, that they say, yeah, I'm just going to go ahead and do it. If the contractor is willing to do it without a proper building permit, I'll get it faster. I'll save some money and I don't have to pay taxes later. Let me just do it. And contractors that are willing to work without a permit, they can receive violations themselves. But homeowners don't realize what they're setting themselves up for later, because then it can be more costly and timely to legalize that structure with an after the fact permit at the end of it. So it's cautionary. And because it's a different language, I've put out a series of YouTube videos just trying to educate homeowners about why it's important, why your contractor should be licensed, insured, why there should be a building permit approved and present on that site when you're doing work, and then to make sure that all the certificates are completed and issued before you let that contractor go away. Yeah, so it's for their own benefit that they get this kind of knowledge to protect themselves.
Deb, that's impressive that you provide these resources for the public. And I also know that you record educational videos teaching people about this language that you said it's a different language, the terms and the know-how, and more importantly, how you can assist them by navigating the process of obtaining a permit or perhaps correcting something that they did and they call you. That's a nice segue into mistakes homeowners make. And what are the top mistakes homeowners make when it comes to permits?
Can I give you a couple of stories that kind of lay that out?
Please do.
Pretty well. Again, we do many permits that are legalizations or after the fact. They're also called in some townships and villages as built structures. Perfect scenario, though, and why it's very important for home buyers to be aware of this, is a client that called me that recently took possession of a home. And he tells me the story that he was sitting at the closing table with the seller and both of their attorneys. And before they signed the documents, the attorney said to him, "Oh, we have an expired pool permit at this property. What do you want to do about that?" And the seller was very quick to jump in and say, "Oh, don't worry about it. I had that pool inspected by the building department and it had passed inspection, but it was just a matter of some other document that he never got around to, that the permit did not close out, which means it wasn't officially approved down to the last part of the structure and electrical work that goes into a pool." So this home buyer felt very pressured, put on the spot. Of course, he still wanted the house and he loved that there was a pool. He was aghast to realize later that this information should have been brought to his attention way before the closing was scheduled. In any case, as they went along, he closed on the deal. He took the seller's word that the pool was okay. So why was he calling us? It turns out that he renewed the pool permit and got it inspected, and the seller was right. Everything was fine with the pool. However, when you're submitting for one permit, you have a property survey that shows all the structures on your property at that time. That is the case that the building department, I think legally as well, has to review the entire survey. And in this case, they found a couple of the structures that were built on this property that never had any permit. And the attorneys and the seller didn't mention that and didn't know that. So the pool was an easy case, but he spent multiplied thousands of dollars with drawing up plans for sunroom conversions, for decks on the property. There was a little retaining wall that needed a zoning variance, which we also assist with our clients. However, it's costly again, adding to the thousands start adding up. And it's unfortunate that he got stuck with this. But many homeowners don't realize once they take possession of the property, they are responsible for everything on that site, even if they didn't build it. Now they're the ones holding the bag. And you really want that information to be verified before you purchase a property. But that's one scenario of somebody coming into something that he didn't realize didn't have a permit, and he certainly didn't install the pool. And then I have this
talk about a reality check for those looking to buy perhaps their first property, their first home. It's not all rosy and popping bottles of champagne when you sign and get the keys. There's so much more to it than that.
It should be a happy occasion, but there's due diligence that really has to fall to the buyer being educated. And that's another one of our series that we have out there about the home buyer, to be aware of things to check before they go to the closing and ask for certain documents and things that don't have final CO issues on them. Then you have negotiating power. Then you don't want to lose the home, but at least be educated into what it's going to take to close out those permits, so that you don't live with something that could be unstable or structurally unsound because it was never checked properly.
What's another story? You said you had a couple.
Yeah, we have great passion for those that are stuck this way because it's another language, it's an industry they didn't expect. There's always a lot of cost to moving into a home, and you don't expect to have to do this type of work afterward. But one of our clients that I tell the story a lot because she lived in this home for decades with her husband. And for her scenario, unfortunately, the husband passed. So she was a widow, and then she needed to sell the home. She was getting up in age and she was going to go live with her daughter. But it turned out that the open permits were on the property, was brought to her attention. And she said, wait a minute, my husband, he used to cover all this. He took care of the deck. He took care of the pool. He took care of the finished basement. He was never one to leave things out. And as it turns out, sometimes homeowners receive the building permit and they don't realize all the steps involved to close it out. Or something comes up in life, they get sidetracked, and the building departments don't give you much notice that your permit is expired 1 year, 2 year, 3 years. They might send one notice, and after that, there's nothing. So for her scenario, she had 3 different areas of the home. So we came in there to draw up plans for her, get new permits issued, and go through the inspection process. But what was sad was she called me. She goes, I'm a nurse. And even though I'm a senior, I still work part-time at the hospital. I'm an educated person. And yet I am at my wit's end trying to figure out what the building department is telling me needs to be done. She said, I sat down by the building department after waiting online a long time, and I was in tears because of the stress of it, the confusion, and I didn't know what to do next until somebody mentioned calling an expediter. And then we were able to take that load off of her. But because widows often get stuck with all this expense and things that they didn't plan for, we extend ourselves and we give a discount to widows and also to military, to veterans and first responders, because we know that they all pay a price for us, for our safety and well-being. And the least that Dynamic Permits wants to do is give back a little bit where we can and have compassion on what they're going through.
That's wonderful. You mentioned that even attorneys don't always catch permit issues. Can you expand a bit on that?
Yes. And I talk more deeply too in some of those video series about why the homeowners have told me, what do you mean there's something illegal on my property? I bought this house legally with an attorney. So how could things be missing on that? So it's unfortunate. The confusion comes usually with your attorney that helps you close on a home deal after your realtor is getting you in there with your accepted offer. There's a title search process, but that is only looking for liens against the property. Sometimes they do a municipality search to look for open permits, expired, or violations, but they don't dig deep into that. So an attorney, although they know what a property survey looks like, because they're in the real estate industry, they don't deal with building department language. They don't realize the difference between a roof overhang over your patio being a structure that requires a building permit, when on a property survey, all they're seeing is a dotted little line with the symbol or RO for roof over. And when that gets to the building department, they have a whole list of things they're going to require about that. So the attorney is covering you to go through that legal process, but it's not looking for any structures that are missing permits. Same thing when they get a home inspector to come in there. They're verifying usually for appliances, fixtures. They'll check out your windows and your foundation doesn't have any cracks or the roof isn't sagging, but they're not investigating the permit side to it. So they don't know if any of those structures are actually built legally through the proper permit, inspected, and then that they don't have a CO at the end of the process. So it's a very unfortunate, very common mistake that home buyers make. And we're hopefully looking to get out there nationally and make people more aware of that. So as I said, I grew up on Long Island, New York, and we do a lot of work there, but we're expanding nationally for that, especially for that home buyer that needs to understand some very basic information that they could find out ahead of time before that closing is scheduled, and make sure your realtor or your attorney looks into that before you have that closing deal.
That's wonderful to hear that your company is expanding, because many of the viewers and listeners to this podcast are from Maryland, the District of Columbia, and Virginia and surrounding areas. So that's really great news. And you and your team, I should say, also have the capability of, because you have this nationwide reach, you help people online, virtual conversations, exchange of information, making the process a lot smoother, right?
Exactly. And thankfully with the internet, it makes it all possible like that. So we'll usually consult with a home buyer that they obtain some type of property survey, either from the seller or order a new one. That's the most important thing before the closing, and have it reviewed. You can either take that to that local building department and say, does everything on this survey have a proper permit and CO that was completed? And then if it's language, again, that you're confused with, then reach out to a permit professional, because they will dissect that survey apart, verify records that are in the building department, and make sure that you don't enter into something without full knowledge, and to discover what is within the four walls of the home, or even that was placed on the property.
At what point in the buying or renovation process should someone bring in a permit professional like you?
That's a great question. And really, it's never too early. And I would say at the beginning of the process, because design professionals might be licensed in a particular state. They might be designing according to that building code. However, the local building departments are permitted to further restrict the design for construction according to their interpretation. So each building department of each township has more potential requirements or pitfalls if you're not aware of it ahead of time. So even though you have a very capable architect or engineer working on the project, and you have a contractor that's worked in several different areas and very experienced, but if you don't have somebody being that liaison with the building department, they could wind up proceeding with design and going expensively into the final phase of design before realizing that something is going to be either not approved or require more of a process like a zoning variance. So you really want a permit professional to review all of that and be part of the conversation from the beginning.
Can you walk us through maybe one or two real life scenarios where permit issues created major problems with a client you were serving?
Yeah, one of the areas that comes up so often is when you have a home with a full basement. A lot of us grew up where the basement was used either for storage, or you're in your parents' house and they threw up some paneling and kind of made a playroom down in the basement. And that was okay for many decades. But building codes change, they get upgraded, and it's usually for safety. And what I'm saying now is when a homeowner is needing to make sure all their COs are in order, one of the most difficult or expensive scenarios can be a finished basement, because the building code now requires two means of egress or exiting in case of a fire or some emergency. What that means is you have a staircase that usually goes from the first floor down to the basement, and that's one method. But they want you to have another means of egress in case there's a fire that's near the stairs, near the heating equipment. And then whether the kids are playing down there or parents are doing laundry down in the basement, they need to get a way to get safely out, or for firemen to get in with his pack on. So we call these egress window wells, or a full door stair that can go in and out of the basement to the exterior, so that if there's a fire, there's another path that either rescuers can come in or family members and guests can get out. So if that is not done, if from the get-go, we can still get your plan made for that finished basement and design into it where that egress escape is going to have to be, whether it's a window or a doorway. And then the construction of that is into the thousands. Those egress and areaways are expensive to build, so it gets complicated from there. Also, some of the older homes don't have proper ceiling height. That can require another type of variance for the building code. If things were built down in a basement, they usually put a drop ceiling and there's duct work down there. So all these parameters can add up to expensive remedial work, a list of remedial work that has to be done in order to pass inspection. You want to find these things out as soon as possible because there are often options. And then as the homeowner, we present it to them and they have to decide which way they want to go to legalize that area of basement conversion.
Now I want to talk a slight pivot I want to make and talk about contractors. Now, many homeowners assume that once they hire a contractor or a GC, the responsibility shifts away from them, but that's not always the case, right? And they trust the contractor to handle everything. Where does that go wrong?
We hear that a lot too. It's with, oh, my contractor, he said he was a one-stop shop where he can take care of it all. He'll make sure there's plans drawn up and the permits are done. And if you need a new survey or not, when you're the homeowner who maybe doesn't have knowledge and understanding into that industry, the pitfalls are you're assuming that one individual is doing everything right and doesn't miss anything. And they might have good intentions, but are you there when the building department comes to inspect? Are you taking their word for it that the inspections pass? So that can go very wrong. I always tell our clients to get copies of all inspection reports. And contractors are often looking to move that job along, right? That's going to make everybody happy. The homeowner is going to be happy. They want to get done, have a happy customer, and then get out of there to their next job. And if you don't wait for inspections and that final certificate, we've had many homeowners that say, I can't get a hold of that contractor anymore. The inspector said he needs to fix something, adjust it, beef up the structure, something. And then if you've already paid them and they've left, then you have no recourse. So we usually advise homeowners to hold off a final payment until you have the final CO from your building department. So again, without having anybody else in the process to check that things were done properly, there's no checks and balances. You're trusting that the contractor's covering it all. Lots of times they might, but enough of our work is where somebody dropped the ball and we go back and help the client legalize something that was either done without a permit or never finished under the proper permit and inspection process. So you want to have somebody else advocate for you. And as a permit professional, that's what we do for our clients.
Deb, in your experience, what types of projects tend to create the biggest permit issues?
So those basement conversions are one of them, again, because if you don't have proper egress, two methods of escaping out of that finished basement, that's often the scenario. Another time, people will take a garage or a basement and convert it into an accessory apartment on their home because they want some additional income, which is all fine and good. And most townships, villages will give permission for a certain amount of that in certain areas. You have to verify your zoning. But if you build that without a permit in place and approval, these days, most likely neighbor or somebody's going to call and complain, there's too many cars over there. We think they have an illegal rental. And then the Department of Public Safety and Code Enforcement comes along, knocks on your door and says, we had a complaint and we want to inspect and investigate. In those scenarios, I do encourage homeowners to not fight back, not get angry. The code official is just doing what they're paid to do, but to pleasantly just tell them you'll have them back for a scheduled inspection at another time. And then call a permit professional, maybe call a contractor, depending on who did the work in there, to verify if everything is up to snuff before you have the inspector in, so we can better prepare you before they come in and they potentially write you a violation for doing that without a permit. But typically, we will then resume communications with that department down at town hall. Their public safety, they want to make sure that nobody can get hurt in that structure. And if we tell them that we're working to legalize it, plans and the permits and inspections, and then they ease off, the heat comes off the homeowner. We can take care of the communications. It can be nerve-wracking. It can make people cry. So we'll deal with all those communications and smooth it out until the process is complete.
Deb, what do you recommend in terms of documentation that homeowners should keep for the benefit of future buyers or for their own families?
Yeah, that's a good question. And if I can weave into that another story of when properties are left to be as an inheritance or a blessing to the other family members, it can be a wonderful thing, but it can be a taxing thing as well. We've had a client, a couple of these scenarios where the property is left in a trust or an estate, and it turns out that they couldn't pass along the property and transfer to a buyer because there were open building permits on it. Now, this is one of those families that said, my father worked with the ambulance corps volunteer. He did everything by the book. My mom was a teacher down there, or she was a nurse, and it sounds like a wonderful family. And they are shocked that things were not closed out properly with the permits. They just can't believe it. When you want to be prepared ahead of time before there's an urgency to pass that property along, because remember, there's holding costs, right? If you're inherited a property, somebody's still paying for the heat, the electric, the water, and you want to have realtors come in and out after preparing the property to sell and to transfer. So the carrying costs can grow. So if you're the owner of that property and the initiator of that estate plan, you want to verify that first that you have a most recent up-to-date property survey. And again, you can call any land surveyor in the area, and the surveyor will come with their team, put up their little tripod, and they not only shoot the boundaries of the property, but every structure there gets like an outline around it. It's not a big detailed drawing. It's a flat 2-dimensional drawing, but it shows every structure. Once you have that, it's a little bit better of a picture. That's where we always start, is we need the property survey. And then if you're the owner of that property and you think you did work or somebody did it, it's best to take that survey down to your local building department and ask them to verify the list of permits and records, and that is everything closed out with a proper CO at the end of that process. And so you want to have a property survey, records of any plans of construction that were done or proper permits, and then the final COs at the end, all the certificates for the original main house, and then any alteration that was done in the house, or accessory structures, outdoor living structures, swimming pools, cabanas, gazebos, roof overs, any of that in the yard. You want to make sure that you have documentation. If not, we encourage you to get the ball rolling on that. Make your family members aware so that you're passing on a blessing with that property and not a problem with that.
It's so important, just like with estate planning, which is what I do, to not only have, update, and maintain your estate planning documents in a secure place that at least one or two trusted people know where to locate those documents, but so too with what for most people is the most valuable asset in their estate, which is their home. Now, yes, some people have second and third properties, but the vast majority of people are single family homeowners, and that's the biggest and most valuable asset in their estate. So what you're encouraging all of us to do is to maintain the documents related to that property, any improvements that have been done, any permits that have been done, all in that same secure space. And that's really going to be a benefit. If heaven forbid you pass away, at least people know where to find documentation regarding improvements or changes that have been done, structural changes that have been done to the property, and what they can do going forward. So that's great information.
That's great advice also, because, and I've seen, I know enough of your work in preparation. Even if you're a young homeowner and you have an estate there really in protecting your children after you or your relatives, how much better to update it every decade or so. And it would be the same advice that we give to people who contact us for that pre-selling process of getting prepared. And they'll say, I want to sell within the year. I'm coming to you now to verify we built something and I don't think we closed it out. They have some vague memory, but it's not their industry, so they just let it go. So we tell them the same thing, have that updated survey. And if you don't have time to go down to the building department and ask for those records, then reach out to a permit professional an expediter can know how and who to talk to. We have one of our mottos is we're gracious but tenacious. We want to get in there and be pleasant because we're objective. We're not the property owner, but we want to advocate for those clients of ours. So we want to be tenacious to get what they need in a timely basis. There has been a scenario that somebody was selling a home. We delivered, they had a short time window. We delivered a CO to their hand before they walked into the closing date. So we prefer to have more time frame ahead of time, but we do pull the rabbit out of the hat every once in a while. But yeah, it's very good advice being prepared beforehand.
I would be remiss, Deb, if we didn't touch on homeowners associations, HOA. There are a lot of people who are watching and listening who are members who reside in a development that is governed by an HOA. How do HOAs complicate the permitting process?
Yep. In our experience, HOAs, homeowners associations, are in place for the benefit of those residents. They're the property owners that are there, right? And there's an upside and sometimes a downside. But the upside is that they keep a watch over what anybody's doing on their property, certainly what's visible on the outside. And that's the protection that you have when you own a property in there with an HOA. However, the downside is then when you do want to build something, the process can be a little elongated. Now, we haven't had a lot of difficulty because clientele that are residing in an HOA are building maybe a deck or a balcony, maybe extending some part of their home in a modest way, because usually those parcels are pretty set for a certain size. And then we will contact the HOA and put a separate application to them with a copy of the plan, photographs of the existing house and structure, and an idea for them of what they're looking to build for this homeowner. And then their process hasn't been too long in our experience, and they'll usually at the next board meeting review it, and we've gotten all approvals for that. And we do need that letter of approval before we go to the local building department for the regular permit process. So the HOA has to come first and give their blessing on it, and then we can go forward with the building department process.
Deb, I can just imagine that there's maybe one, maybe two or more people who are listening or watching this podcast and going, I've got structural changes on the property, but we didn't get a permit for it. We DIY'd it. Is it ever too late to fix a permit issue?
Never too late. It is just time and costs that are involved. Often when structural elements are involved, we will then draw in some of our consultants, like a structural engineer, to come and investigate the site, review drawings that either they create or if we prepare. And they need to verify that structure because we're talking about people's lives, their well-being and that. So we'll usually have them verify. And sometimes we have to beef up a structure or tell the contractor that something was missed, pull in a contractor to hire for remedial work, and then have the local building department, after the permit is approved, to inspect that and certify it after the fact. We've never had any scenario where anything had to be deconstructed, fortunately. Usually we can get that approved. I think it's worse to leave it for your family or for the buyer who takes your house on next and is not aware of it. So it's better to come clean with it right away, and we'll work it through, and everybody will have more peace of mind going to that closing.
Deb, as we are reaching the end of our conversation, I did want to mention that one thing I really appreciate about your work is your focus on protecting vulnerable homeowners, especially women, widows, and seniors. Why are these groups especially at risk, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think with times change, building codes change, zoning codes change. And if you're a homeowner, especially the ones that from our parents' day, often they stayed in the same house for many decades. So they're not thinking anything about the world is changing around them. And maybe they did some alterations at the house or put in a simple little above ground pool even, and don't think that it's any large issue. Because back in the day, those things were overlooked, or everybody just let everybody be. But when emergencies happen or people get hurt, codes change, for the safety of others. But these long-term homeowners especially are caught off guard. And often seniors are living with a fixed income. So we typically want to start the beginning process with investigating the site after that survey is done, taking photographs, consulting, and then get a plan and a permit together, and then make sure it's inspected and see that process all the way. There are some expediting firms that will just hand over the building permit and then go to their next job. But because we have a team, fortunately, I have a team of great professional women that we've built up. And again, they're gracious. They are understanding of the burden that the property owners often deal with. And they can also intervene at the building departments for this. The ones that are vulnerable, we offer a reduced rate for them. We'll often give them a 10% discount, again, for widows, military veterans, and first responders, because often they're at risk. Some of them are suffering from PTSD, have other ailments, or taking care of a sick loved one. There's so many needs. So we will often reach out to them and say, let us do the whole process for you. It can add up to a lot of costs. So we're going to scale back that cost as best that we can and give to you to some degree that we can to help you, and it will feel better knowing that it's closed out properly and that they have peace of mind. We don't want anybody crying at the building department.
That's wonderful that you're such a blessing to those groups. What warning signs should adult children watch for when helping aging parents manage property?
A lot of the building departments are online now, and they'll send out email notifications. They still do some regular snail mail, but I've heard from many senior homeowners, what do you mean the building department didn't send me a notice that the permit was expired? Or I had a notice once a long time ago, they didn't keep up with it, so I figured it was okay with them. They're used to the system, and they're not used to either going online and verifying documents or even looking for current code requirements. So technology can be a challenge for them. So if you have seniors in your life, you really want to ahead of time for that estate. Again, it can't really hurt. A couple $100 usually for an updated property survey. Get that survey done and prepared ahead of time, and then verify with the building department that everything has proper permit or CO, or contact a permit professional, and we can consult with you either over the phone for that basic complimentary consult at first and maybe steer you in the right way, or we'll propose to do more services for you. But it needs to be looked into, before things get out of hand.
Deb, I'm enjoying this conversation so much, and I could easily talk to you for another 2 hours. But as we wrap up, what are 3 takeaways that every homeowner should remember about permits?
So my first number 1 advice always is to obtain an updated property survey. Get a new survey so that you know exactly what's on the property right at that time. That's number 1. And then number 2 is to verify with those records at the building department that you have proper permits that were closed out. You have certificate of occupancies on file. Ask them for copies if you don't have them on there. And then if this is overwhelming and you don't have time, then contact a permit professional to do that for you.
And how can listeners and viewers learn more about you and really connect with you to access your services? I'm going to put a couple of those ways on screen right now. But if you can tell us, and also tell us about where they can find all these videos that we've talked about.
Thank you, Elsa. Yep. Our website at dynamicpermits.com has a little button that says get a free quote or that complimentary consultation. Right away is the easiest way. It's a very few fields that you have to fill in, or if you have questions, it's no problem just to submit that, and then we'll contact you typically within that same day, sometimes within that hour, and get back to you to consult with you that way. Otherwise, you can see us on LinkedIn. We post things on Facebook. There is a expanding library of videos on YouTube for the how-tos about permits, zoning variances, if you're selling your home, preparation, if you're going to buy a home, what you should look for. Commercial projects too. We work with property owners for commercial and industrial expansion. Those videos are out there too. All you need is a few keywords usually, and you'll be pointed right toward us. As the chat GPT and the AI is funneling things over, they recognize us, and then we'll get in contact with you afterward.
Deb, it's really been a joy and a pleasure to have you on the podcast today. Everybody, we've been speaking with Deb Yelvington, founder and president of Dynamic Permits. Deb, do you have any closing comments for the audience?
I have to go with another one of our slogans is, you want to avoid getting stuck in a permit pickle. So it's reach out to that permit professional if you don't know if you've got the proper building permits, or you find out that something was built without a permit and you need to get that legalized. And there's a number of ways that we can help you with that. So you want to verify all your documents and reach out to a professional. It's the best way to get the job done.
Outstanding. As estate planning attorneys, we often talk about protecting what you've built. Today's conversation is a reminder that protecting your legacy also means understanding the hidden issues that can quietly put your home, your finances, and your family at risk. I hope that you found value in today's conversation, today's podcast. Share it with someone that you know and that could benefit from it. And if you are interested in starting your estate plan and you reside within the state of Maryland or the District of Columbia, I invite you to schedule a complimentary 15-minute call with a member of our team. The link will be in the show notes. Thanks again for joining us today. And remember, stay informed, stay empowered, and take control of your legacy. I'll see you next time.